everyone, it's Damon Lim here from datacenterHawk, Regional Director of Asia Pacific. Today we have Darren Webb here from Evolution Data Center. Darren, thanks for being on our Hawk Talk. Do you want to give a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. Well, first, thank you, Damon, for the opportunity to join your podcast or your series of videos. My name is Darren Webb. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Evolution Data Centers. What do Evolution do? So we started 3 years ago with a two-pronged part of our strategy, which are still valid today, despite some changes and pivots along the way, and they are that we only focus on the high growth emerging markets. Some refer to them as tier 2 markets in Asia. I personally prefer the high growth markets, and I think we're starting to see that play out definitely now, without doubt. And we focus very much on sustainability. Now, look, that's a huge word, and it means different things to different people, and I'm sure we'll explore more. But for us, even in hindsight, I feel we put sustainability at the core of our business 3 years ago, when it wasn't quite so cool. Now it's the kind of the new cool boy in school, along with AI. So it really does mean it really was at the heart of what we do, and we can talk through that in terms of what does it mean for us, particularly the use of renewable energy. So we tie those two things together: those high growth emerging markets, the access to organic renewable energy in those markets, even if regulatory challenges are still there. And that's really where Evolution came from. And as I said, if you look what's happened in the last year and a half, some of these new markets in Asia are just, the growth is enormous. The opportunities for more growth is even bigger. So, happy to be in the sector we're in. Happy to be in the region we're in. Asia still for me is going to be where the majority of growth are. Why? Well, very simply, it's where a lot of the population are, right? And so, if you put those two things together, we're in a good spot. So, excited for the conversation and excited to explore some of those topics more.
Definitely agree with you that APAC is the place to be. That's why we're all here. Earlier, you mentioned a little bit about the high growth markets. Believe that's why you made a decision, or your company made a decision behind, Bangkok, Manila, and Vietnam. Could you shed a little bit light in terms of picking those markets versus, primary and secondary markets like Australia and Malaysia that might seem better suited for your sustainability goals?
Yeah, look, it's a multifaceted answer. So, it's not one single thing. I'd actually disagree that the tier 1 markets, the traditional tier 1 markets, play into sustainability more. I think it's actually completely the opposite. If you look at the two traditional hubs in Asia, Hong Kong and Singapore, where I'm sat today, they don't have a big population, number one. And two, and more importantly, they don't have any renewable energy, and certainly not at scale. I know people talk about solar here, makes me laugh a little bit. It's just never going to scale to the size of the market here. And it's certainly not going to scale to the size of the future markets, right? So, that's not a criticism of Hong Kong and Singapore. They will always play a part because of their connectivity, but they're not going to be where the growth comes from, right? And, if you look at the emerging markets, there's why go there? Well, if you look at from a utility point of view, land, power, and more importantly, green power, you're going to get those in the emerging markets, in what's sometimes called the tier 2 markets. You can't get them in all of the tier 1 markets. So, again, not criticism, but Singapore had the moratorium, as we both know. That stifled growth here. Personally, I think that growth has now shifted largely to Malaysia. It's not coming back. I personally I'm not a big believer in the 1+1 strategy. I think it's a flawed strategy. I think Malaysia is very happy with that strategy because they picked up all of that incremental growth. If you look at Hong Kong, there's land shortages, it's a small place, and there's geopolitical challenges there. Let's face it, the data center market is under some challenge. We're even seeing some traditional operators or Western operators starting to sell some of their assets, right? So there's geopolitical challenges there. Japan, land shortages, expensive land. Korea, which is arguably a tier 1 market now, power challenges. So, in each of the big tier 1s, actually, I'd argue there's more barriers to entry than there are in the tier 2s. They're just different barriers, right? So tier 2s are, they're hard to work in, right? And that's why we pick them, because if we can crack those, we create a very valuable platform for both our customers and for our investors. But also, so there's that aspect of, well, actually, where is the sustainable energy? And my view is it's very much in the tier 2 markets, in the emerging markets. They all pretty much have it. There's also big populations in each of those markets. I think people underestimate it. You know, if you look at Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, that's probably got 300 million people there or thereabouts. That's nearly as big as the US, right? Across 3 of our markets in Asia, not just one market. So it's a huge population, right, that's underserved from a data center point of view today. So you've got a big population, you've got governments that support digital transformation, governments that want inward investment. You've got a entrepreneurial, certainly in Vietnam, very entrepreneurial generation coming through. Thailand, I'd say, is similar. You've got markets where there's renewable energy, organic renewable energy already in the country. Again, we can talk later, can you actually access it? And there are definitely challenges, but it's there. I'd rather be operating in a market where it's there and there's challenges to get it from A to B than work in a market where there is no A, right? So there is no renewable energy. So you can talk as much as you want, but in reality, you're probably going to end up buying credits. I think that model is going to start dying or certainly come under huge pressure. And inevitably, data centers, and you're seeing it now, data centers, and we've talked about this for a few years, are going to start chasing power, and particularly green power, before they chase connectivity and a stable environment, both geographically and politically. I'm not saying they aren't important things. Of course, they're important things, but the requirement for power is so huge now. And of course, we've talked for 5 minutes, and AI has just been mentioned, which is an amazing thing. But with AI, that's even going to change different dynamics, right? And the kind of size, the capacity, the density, it has to go after where the power is, has to go after where the land is. And ultimately, that's not where the tier 1 markets are. Now, they will continue to grow, but I think the tier 2 markets will grow at a much higher CAGR. And so we focus on those ones. That's not a criticism of the tier 1s. It's just saying our strategy is very much on the tier 2 high growth markets. And again, we can talk about evolution, but at a market level, those markets are starting to play out. That strategy is starting to play out. If you look at Thailand now, huge opportunity in Thailand, huge growth. So many operators looking to go in there. We've seen just this week, another big cloud guy, US cloud guys, announced the intention to build an availability zone there. There's AI opportunities there. All the cloud guys are there now. And that's how these markets can just go from, if you look at Indonesia, and we know this from our history, 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, question marks whether people go in direct, difficult to do business there, political challenges. Look at it now. Everyone's there, right? Malaysia's just been through a similar thing in the last year and a half. These markets will happen because there's not enough land, power, utility, growth roadmap in some of the tier 1 markets.
Yeah, definitely agree with you that if there's a will, these markets will happen, right? And it definitely sounds like you have a plan on how to do so in some of these newer markets. Will you be able to share a little bit more about how you're looking to address some of these challenges, establishing large-scale sustainable data centers?
Yeah. Look, I kind of alluded to a little bit of a pivot earlier, and it's not a change in our strategy; it's an addition to our strategy. So when we started 3 years ago, that lovely phrase AI, well, of course it was around, but it wasn't being talked about, and you really didn't see the deployment. Certainly in Asia, I would argue, you didn't see the deployments of any real materiality. That's clearly changed. And what else has changed? Well, a few of the cloud guys are self-building, right? So you kind of go, wow, the market was quite limited in terms of, if you were focused on the cloud service providers, it was quite limited in terms of actual number of customers, not in terms of the market growth, but the actual real number of customers is less than 10 in that kind of magnitude, and some of them self-building. So that required a little bit of a pivot as well. So we looked at not just co-location, but then build to suit, and that certainly opened up a big addressable market for us. But to answer your question more specifically about sustainability, again, I kind of refer back to my first one. If you look what we've done already, and I've said this before, we didn't choose the easy option, right? And that's, again, not a criticism of what's been done before. What maybe is a little bit of a criticism of what's been done before. We didn't just choose to go and get a site, hook up to the grid, get some power and say, hey, we're here, Mr. Customer. We chose to do that, but in parallel, work with generators, with renewable generators in each of the markets we're looking at to say, how can we future-proof our projects, right? And by the way, our intention is not to have a single project in a single market. Our absolute strategy is to have multiple sites in each of our markets we operate in. In fact, we passionately believe, aspirational as it may be, that you can be number 3 or number 4 operator in those markets from a DC point of view, because they're traditionally telco markets, right? So there's definitely room for pure DC players to come in and take a forward position. So, we've been working with generators in each of those markets. So we announced, I think you may have seen an MOU with Bampu Next in Thailand, which also covers Vietnam in the future. Now, I'll be very clear, Damon, right? Their power generation is here. It's in a remote location, and there's lots of these generations, but it's in a remote location. Our data center, our first project's in Bangkok. Power from A cannot get to B without the grid, right? And this is assumed as a regulatory position allows for it. So in Philippines, as an example, only Philippines and India today, Vietnam has trialed it, allow direct PPAs where you can go and purchase that power and say, look, I didn't buy the power from the grid, I bought it from generator A. The challenge being, you still have to get from A to B, right? And it has to use transmission, and the only transmission is the grid or the grids. And in some countries, Vietnam being an example, there's a single grid, right? So even when you do a PPA or virtual PPA, as some people refer to them, you're doing absolutely the right thing, but it's not the perfect scenario. The perfect scenario is you directly connect to that generation source, you exclude the grid from the power to your site completely. And we do have one exciting project in one of the markets to do that at scale. But the point being, we took the hard road, the hard option, which is spending a year plus negotiating the PPA in Philippines, and the same in Thailand, which covers Vietnam as well. And every market we go to in the future, we'd do the same thing. That's because we want to say to our clients, we have secured some green renewable power. Can I sit there honestly and say to that client, by the time it gets to the site, it's green power? No, because it's mixed at the transmission level. And by the time it gets to us, it's just a neuron, right? So I won't ever declare we have 100% green power at our site. I will declare we bought 100% green power to match the power at our site. It is not a perfect scenario. Is it better than carbon credits? In my opinion, 1,000,000%, right? Because what we're effectively saying in that market is, Mr. Grid, we don't want your power, right? We really don't want it. All we really want is your transmission, and we don't really want that either. It's just we have no choice but to use your transmission. And what you're doing is, but one, you're investing in generation, so more money goes into new renewable generation, right? So you're funding those projects to come on in that 3, 4, 5, 7 years time. And you're also putting pressure on the grid to say, guys, DC operators, and we're the biggest off takers for you. If you look at it from single size, we're biggest off takers and probably always will be. We don't really want your product, right? So you need to decarbonize. Because if you can decarbonize and invest in renewable energy, then we'll take your green stuff, right? So you're putting more money, you're moving money to the renewable sector, which is great for new investments and additive power going forward. And you're also putting pressure on the grid. Now, the challenge is, who owns the grids? The governments, right? So these are state-owned grids, right? And so you're kind of in this challenge of, you're in Thailand, for example, working with the government to say, hey, you need to change the regulatory position to allow for us to do a PPA to secure that power direct. But you're kind of asking them to cut off their arm a little bit, right? Because you're taking revenue away from the grid. But at the same time, these countries have their own carbon footprint commitments, right? So if they truly want to decarbonize, then that's what they've got to do, right? They've got to force their grid into to decarbonizing, put more money or allow more money investment into renewable energy. And so we're playing our little part in that, Damon. We're not certainly not playing a big. We're playing our little part by saying, Mr. Customer, we went to secure some future power from a renewable generator. If we've got a PPA, then we will allow you, if possible, and to port either the whole PPA or part of that PPA to you. So it comes out of, we're no longer part of that contractual commitment between A and B. You replace us, that's now your green power. If you want to declare it on your footprint, please do. And so, we're enabling our customers, or contributing to our customers hitting their own carbon footprint commitments. And that's our job, we think, because it's not, we're just, as you know, we're just charging power as a pass-through. We're not making any money on this. We're a facilitator, right? So we want to facilitate the best possible green power we can. And it's not easy and it's not perfect. Not sure it will ever be perfect, but we are definitely taking the hard, long, difficult roads, but we're coming to an output that says, okay, this is the best we can achieve considering the regulatory position in that market today. But we're also trying to influence regulatory positions to say it needs to get better, Mr. Government.
Yeah, I mean, one thing's for sure is that policies are constantly going to evolve to meet the different kind of requirements from businesses and consumers. One of the things I'm a little bit curious about is, we're hearing like gigawatt campuses in the US, for example, coming up right now. Looking at some of the markets that you're looking at, what do you think, say in 3 to 5 years could be some of the sizes of these campuses?
Well, look, it's going to happen, right? I don't know if you're going to see gigawatt campuses in Asia in the next few years, right? But we're talking to some clients now, hundreds of megawatts, right? So actually, a gigawatt's not actually not that far away. But this is a really interesting point, Damon, right? So if you are, and I'm not going to name any, right? Because I'm not going to make it personal. If you're a big cloud service provider, right, that's made these 2030, 2035, 2040 commitments, you're a public company, you're a consumer company, right? Because you're very much, your brand is very much considered in the consumer world. Could you really, and this is a question, right, that you don't need to answer, could you really launch a gigawatt campus anywhere in the world today and to say it's to support AI, you're going to get big claps, everyone's going to get very excited, and then you're going to say, I'm connected it direct to the grid and it's coal-based. Are you going to say that? My view is there's no way you can say that. There's no way, because you're going saying, hey, look, revenue is so important to us that, forget about our sustainability targets. They're over there, right? So these things are these kind of forces are kind of pushing each other apart, right? Gigawatt campuses, carbon commitment, right? Those two things don't sit necessarily nicely together. We've seen a major cloud company just yesterday announce a gigawatt of power purchase with a big new, and you're going to see more of that, right? And I personally see, maybe one of your questions later will be, what do I see as the future? I think you'll see operators, DC operators, getting more into cogen, right, with generation, with renewable generator source, because that power, that green power, is going to become the key point. You can't operate a 500 megawatt campus and say it's all based off coal. I honestly don't think you're going to be able to do that. It depends on your customers type, right? But I think for the majority of customers, that's going to be a big no-no. So it's not just access to power. I think everyone now is chasing power, and that will happen for 1 or 2 years. I think it's inevitable it chases green power very soon. So the whole dynamics of our industry, and you know it better than me, is, again, people used to chase connectivity, right? I want to be in an area where lots of connectivity options are, because that's the most important thing to me.
The fiber highways, etc.
For AI, do they really care so much about this carrier neutral things and all these things we used to talk about, 5 points of it? Give me some internet access, put me somewhere where there's cheap land, cheap utility, and I believe green power. I'm happy, right? Because it's for training. It's, so it doesn't need, it's not so latency sensitive. It doesn't need to, they haven't got customers directly hung off it, as an example. So that's changing the dynamics. But just in our traditional world, the cloud world, again, I just asked a question and I don't have an answer. Could you launch a gigawatt campus in Asia today and say it's connected to the grid and it's off coal?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a tough one to sell if anyone does that. You're right, because pretty much everyone have announced their goals, and that's where certain countries have even tried to slow down data center developments and stuff like that. Yeah,
look, there's we're in Singapore, right? So we can, but we're seeing it in Dublin as well. We've seen it in Amsterdam before. And that's another reason why I think that I think there's a misnomer. I think the industry has a few little secrets it doesn't like to disclose. One is, from a job point of view, actually, we don't create many jobs. In construction, yes, right? But in operations, no, right? I mean, a data center can run off 20 people, right? I mean, arguably slightly less, right? So it's not a huge job creator. And then in land, scarce areas, Singapore being a very prime example, that ratio of footprint to jobs is not that great, right? And then it's sucking up power, right? You go, okay, there's a lot of, that's not all good things. At the same time, that's not, by the way, it's not being negative. We underpin digital transformation, right? Everything we do as humans now pretty much is digitally connected. So data centers are, I've heard it be called the lungs, the heart, whatever organ you want to choose. It is fundamentally a part of how we live, right? And it will continue to be that way. In fact, it's only going to go one way, which is more, right? We're going to be more connected. Hard to envision as an old man like me what that means, but it's certainly going to happen. So again, this is a long-winded way of saying those growth markets where there is land, where there is utility, where there is room for expansion, where there is big populations, for me, there's an inevitability that you have to move to there. And it's not just in Asia we're seeing this. We're seeing it in Europe as well. If you look at a lot of the new announcements, they're for new markets, right? You're not the traditional flat markets. You're seeing people announcing huge deals in markets that weren't traditionally considered data center markets. So that's going to happen, and in the US, you're seeing people move away from the traditional zones to go out to new zones because that's where they can get land and utility. So what's happening in Asia, we're seeing in other parts of the world. And so it's not a one-off. It's clearly going to keep happening.
Thanks for sharing that. And zooming in a little bit about yourself, I understand that you have a personal commitment to health and sustainability. How does that influence, Evolution Data Centers, CSR initiatives and any kind of like daily practices, policies,
Yeah, look,
etc.?
I think it's definitely a tough one, right? Because you have to kind of challenge yourself, right? So on different levels. So I'll give you a few examples from a personal point of view because that was how the question was posed. So I've just recently, at the moment, trying to be a non-meat eater, right? I'm not going to save the world by doing that. Actually, there's personal reasons for wanting to try that out, right? But it's because when I was on my 50th birthday, I was climbing or walking up Mount Kilimanjaro, and I made the mistake with maybe some altitude making me slightly not fully working, was to watch a documentary on Netflix about meat production. It probably wasn't the best time with a bit of altitude sickness to watch that. So I set myself a challenge to come back and reduce my meat eating amounts, right? And so I'm now 2 or 3 months into that. Again, it's not going to save the world. And will I go back to eating meat? Almost inevitably, but it's a recognition that we can't continue as a population to eat the amount of meat that we're producing to keep up with demand. Not a criticism of anyone that eats meat, right? Just want to be clear. It's just a recognition that we can't keep doing what we're doing and expect there to be a good outcome from a global climate point of view. And so it's just about taking things into your daily life. So whether it's not using single-use plastics, not taking Singapore, as we both know, it's got better recently, but shops will give you plastic bags all day long. They put one item in one bag, one item in the next bag. It was just, they didn't really care. It's got better. It's definitely got better. But so taking a bag with you so you don't have to constantly take shop bags. I am not perfect at all. In fact, I never will be, and I don't want to be. And I certainly still do things that I probably shouldn't. But my own personal commitment to health and to trying to be a better human living on our one planet. And as a team, we all make commitments, whether it's to reduce our taxi rides, whether to walk in, whether to run more, whether each of the team makes their own commitment. Do I monitor it? No. I mean, it's for them to do for themselves and judge themselves. But it does help. I mean, that all sounds a bit flappy in a way, right? But it does help when we're thinking about designing and building data centers to think, okay, what's the best outcome? What's the best decision we can make today that gives us, we can stand behind later. So very small example, Damon. When I go to see new sites, and this has happened many times, and I'm sure some brokers can testify to it. If that site has lots of trees on it, I walk away because I'm not sure how I can later sit in front of a client talking about sustainability having just said, yeah, I took 3-4 hectares of land and I chopped down all those trees and I put a load of cement and steel in the ground, and now I'm a sustainable champion. I don't see how those two things sit well together. Again, this is not taking them. If it sounds like a moral high ground, I apologize. It's not my intent. It's just saying it gives you the opportunity to challenge yourself and go, okay, what if I'm sitting later in front of a client, or I'm sitting in front of someone saying, tell me why you're talking about sustainability, that I can actually go, well, look, we did this, I did this, we did that. Is it perfect? No, but we took the right decision at the right time with the options available to us, knowing that tomorrow, figuratively, when we do the next build, there'd be different options coming along. There'd be different tech. There'd be different ways of calling it. And what we did last year won't be the right thing to do, but it was the right thing to do at the time. And so that iterative process of, you may have seen me say, I don't believe in green data centers, right? And I fundamentally don't believe in green data centers. And I fundamentally believe as an industry, we are making a mockery of that challenge by saying green. So I prefer to say greener, right? Why? Because that suggests it's an iterative process. It is one that has no endpoint, right? It has no perfect scenario, because there is no perfect scenario to having a green data center. In fact, it's rubbish, right? Because they are made of steel and concrete, which are two of the biggest emissions that in the world. It requires lots of shipping of materials, lots of production, lots of scope 3. It will never be green. If you want to build a green data center, buy some land, leave it as it is. There's your green data center. If you want to actually construct a green data center, aim for greener, right? So I think as an industry, we have made a rod for our own back. Our PR machines have got out of hand because we went from, oh, okay, sustainability's come along. Okay, we bought some credits. Now we're a green data center. Come on, guys. I mean, what does that even mean? Someone please justify to me, what does a green data center mean? So for us, greener gives us a iterative approach. It means that we can, either we do something today and we learn in 2 years that was the wrong, there's a better decision. Use the better decision at that time. That's fine, right? I'm fine with that. To suggest it's green suggests you've solved it, Damon, right? If you say I'm now green, that means you've solved it. Done. Please stop talking to me about sustainability, Damon. I have a green data center. We have to challenge ourselves as a company and as an industry to say, are we making the right decisions at the right time with the options available to us that create the best possible outcome? Very small example. We looked at putting some, I forget the exact terminology, but solar panels on the side of the building. It has an acronym. Look lovely, right? Creates some power, not enough for any IT load, right? But it creates some power. It was a 17-year payback, Damon. That's therefore not a good option to take because it just doesn't financially stack up, right? So that was one where you say, look, I wish it was a 6-7 year payback. We may well have gone down that road, but it's not. It's a 17-year payback. That's not the right decision for our investors. I'd argue it's not the right decision for our customers, and I'd argue it's not the right decision for our business. But something else will come along and say, well, for instance, water cool, you're using different chillers. So we're looking to use water cooled chillers so we can reduce our WUE. That may push our PUE up a little bit. And as you know, I don't like that talking about PUE, but WE will come down. The other one will go up a little bit, but that's a trade-off, right? Because arguably everyone focuses on power. People don't talk about water so much, but water will be a scarce utility in our world, certainly in some markets very soon as well. So you have to look at it. You have to challenge yourself ultimately, Damon, right? Everything you do from a design, from a construct, from an operate point of view, are we making the right decisions at the right time with the right information available to us?
Thanks so much for your frank sharing today, and it was a real pleasure having you with us.
Thanks, Damon. Thank you for the opportunity, and good luck the rest of the series. And I'm sure I will see you around very soon.
Yep, and we'll have that PUE conversation another day.
Please don't.